So this is the brand new GPU from Nvidia, the RTX 4070ti. I've got the MSI Gaming X Trio here, 4070 Ti, and Nvidia says that these cards can be up to 3 times faster than the RTX 3090 Ti, this one over here. That's pretty much double the price in some of the cases. Well then, it's time to find out the truth. And as a creator, because this is only focused on creators. 3D, 2D video, photo editing, let's go.
Looking for a cheap way to license your Windows? Check out Whokeys through the links in the video description. Make sure to use the code TN20 to get a 30% off. Paste the license to the activation settings and you're all done. This license is for Windows 10, but you can upgrade it to Windows 11 for free. They also offer Microsoft Office 19 license. Use the same code TN20 to get a 30% off. Check out whokeys.com in the video description below.
If you haven't seen the unboxing of these cards, then I highly recommend you check them out. They're on the channel, but the TUF is much smaller than the MSI card. The MSI card is still very, very big. Just so you know, if you didn't know this before, this was originally launched as 4080 12GB version. And there's the 16GB version, which we have tested on the channel if you want to see that review. But then there's this one. Now it's 3070 Ti because obviously there's actually a massive spec difference and it's not actually 4080. So there's going to be probably 4080 Ti as well at some point later on this year or whenever, I don't know when, because there's quite a bit of a gap between 4080 and 4090, but then this 4070 Ti is just underneath the 4080. Looking at the specs, you can see that the GPU is now AD104, which is different than the 4080, which is AD103. And it's the same 4nm process as 4080. In terms of CUDA cores, the 4080 has 26% more CUDA cores, but the 3070 Ti has 20% less CUDA cores. And it's the same story with TMUs, Tensor cores, and RT cores. In terms of video memory, first time we're seeing 70 series, 40 or X70 series, a card that has 12GB of VRAM, which for me as a creator is very, very good news. Previously we had to go into the 4080 or 4080 Ti or 80 kind of series cards, but now we can get that in here, which is fantastic. The 4080 though has 16GB, so extra 4GB of RAM, and the 3070 Ti has 4GB less at 8GB. The memory bus is 192-bit, which is actually slower than the 3070 Ti, which is 256, the same as 4080. The memory bandwidth as well in here is actually slowest compared to the 4080 and 3070 Ti, which is interesting, but it still uses PCIe 4 X16 slot for the bus interface, and the TDP or GDP is 285 watts. The 4080 is 320 watts, and the 3070 Ti has a TDP of 290 watts, which is just 5 watts more, but let's have a look how does it perform. The MSRP is $799 US, and I highly recommend you go check out the latest pricing in the description below, because this time we don't have a Founders Edition, and that's why I have two board partners cards here, one from MSI and one from ASUS. There's lots of different models out there. There's OC models and then non-OC models. To be honest, the OC and non-OC models, there's not that big of a difference for creators within the margin of error, so I just recommend you get the cheapest one. For example, these two cards here, check out whichever one is cheapest in the description below, you check that. But also some of the size requirements maybe matter to you, like the TUF is much smaller than the MSI Gaming X Trio there. Now, compared to the previous generation, the 3070 Ti, we have increased $200 in the price range for the same model, which is quite a bit. So the $200, is it worth it? We're going to find out in a moment. But I'm in the same boat as you, where I don't like to see the price increase of these GPUs. But Nvidia is in such a perfect spot where they can charge whatever for their GPUs, just because, especially if you're a creator, there really isn't any other option out there. Because a lot of the creative applications mostly run much better on the Nvidia cards, and a lot of them don't even support AMD cards. And Intel, well, Intel still has some work to do until it becomes competitive in the creative field there in terms of GPU performance. So yes, it's bad to see the price increase, but there's no other option, my friends. If you're a creator, it is what it is. But does the price still make sense compared to the previous generation? What's going to be sold out there? Let's have a look. Now, the RTX 4080 is about $400 more expensive, which is quite a lot more expensive. So let's see if that performance difference there makes sense as well. In terms of the GPU test bench, I'm using an i7-12700 for the CPU. Motherboard is Asus B660 Creator D4. RAM is 64GB Kingston Fury Beast RGB 3600MHz CL18. Cooler is Deepcool Castle EX White. Case is the Fantex P600S without the panels on, so basically open test bench, and the SSD is Samsung 980 Pro 1TB. The PSU is Asus ROG Thor 1200 watt power supply. I'm using Windows 11, and for the driver I'm using the latest GeForce game ready driver that Nvidia has provided to test these cards. But whenever you get the cards, there's probably going to be a studio version of the driver available as well. So as a creator, I recommend you use the studio driver because there's probably a bit more stability out there. Looking at the power draw of these GPUs, the 4070ti actually pulls 285 watts, exactly what the specs say. And even though being a board partner card and an OC card, I am not seeing more than 285 watts being pulled, which is just interesting. The 4080 pulls about 7% more at 305 watts, even though being 320 watts TGP rated. And the 3070ti pulls the most in this bunch here at 310 watts. In terms of cooling the cards, as you can see, there's no problem cooling the cards. The cards are very, very nice and cool. The 4070ti, obviously because it's a smaller cooler now in there and a smaller card, runs a little bit hotter than the 4080, which actually uses the 4090 cooler, which is massively over-engineered cooler for the 4080. It runs one of the coolest cards I've ever tested there. And the 3070ti is a little bit more hotter than the 4070ti. Looking at Geekbench 5 specs here, first to really see where do these GPUs kind of line up against each other. And I'm also using an RTX 3090ti here for the benchmark version. The benchmark version I'm using is the Asus TUF RTX 3090ti, but because I don't have that card at hand anymore, it was a loaner card, I'll be showing this Zotac RTX 3090ti, but they perform within the margin of error. But just, you know, visual representation is this Zotac card, but actual benchmarks have been done on the Asus RTX 3090ti TUF. So the 4080 is about 22 to 26% faster in the CUDA and OpenCL and Vulkan scores. The 3070ti is about 28% slower in the CUDA scores and about the same slower in the OpenCL score, but about 17% slower in the Vulkan score. The 3090ti though is 15% faster in the CUDA scores, about 10% faster in the OpenCL scores, and about 11.7% faster in the Vulkan scores. Moving on to Photoshop first of all, and here we can see that the 4070ti and 4080 perform very, very similar performance, not much difference. The 4080 is about 2% faster overall, but general score is about 6.4% faster and the GPU score is about 4% faster. The 3070ti is only 1.5% slower, so not that much of a difference in terms of generations from 30 series to 40 series, exactly the same model. The 3090ti is about 0.3% faster than the 4070ti. So in the photo editing applications, not that much of a difference between these cards. And the same goes with Lightroom Classic, and the performance there is even smaller. So there's no point in looking at the difference between Lightroom Classic. So if you're a photo editor, it doesn't really matter to you. In terms of Premiere Pro and video editing performance, the 4080 is actually about 4% slower here compared to the 4070ti. Now, this is not just one test done, and this is an average of a lot of tests of these GPUs. And I thought, why is that the 4070ti is faster than the 4080? I am not 100% sure, but I've asked Nvidia and hopefully they will answer before we upload the video and we can insert this into the video or edited video there. But basically the clock speed of the 4070ti is highest of this class, and because the media engines are exactly the same on all of the 40 series, so you've got the same generation, you know, decoders and encoders, the NVENC and NDEC media engines inside there. So now, because the clock speed is faster, now this is speculation here, it would also probably, I'm thinking, affect the media engine performance, because there's not more media engines or bigger media engines, they're exactly the same, but because of the clock speed of the card, maybe though they will run faster, and that's why we're getting a little bit of a better performance. But you can see that the export and the live playback scores are actually better on the 4070 Ti. The 3070 Ti is about 4% slower in the extended overall score and about 8% slower in the standard overall score. Interestingly, the extended export score is actually faster on the 3070 Ti. I'm not sure if this is because of the memory bus, but that's interesting analysis there. It could be also that we have to wait for the drivers to improve or mature a little bit, and we'll see even better performance from the 40 series, but that's what I'll have to work with here at the moment. The 3090 Ti is 6% faster compared to the 4070 Ti in the extended overall score, and about 0.5% faster in the standard overall score. If we are looking at the standard live playback and extended live playback, we can see that the 3090 Ti is actually slower than the 4070 Ti. And that, again, I am assuming is because of the clock speeds and media engines just being faster and new generation on the 40 series, which would actually make sense. But extended export score isn't faster, and neither is the standard export score faster. The effects and GPU score, though, is much faster on the 3090 Ti. In After Effects, we're seeing a similar kind of performance, that the 4080 isn't actually faster than the 4070 Ti, and the RTX 3070 is about 0.2% faster than the 4070 Ti, which is just ridiculous. That just shows that the After Effects doesn't really utilize the GPU power as well as some of the other applications. The 3090 Ti is about 1.9% faster compared to the 4070 Ti, and the GPU score is 13% faster there on the 3090 Ti. DaVinci Resolve now, where GPU is actually much better utilized, we can see that the 4080 is about 7 to 8% faster in the extended and standard overall scores. The GPU effects, though, is almost 35% faster than the 4070 Ti, which is huge increase in performance. The 3070 Ti is about 5.5% to 6% slower in the extended and standard overall scores. Obviously, the GPU effects is 14% slower, because here we can really see that the clock speeds and the new architecture is much better at the rasterization power and GPU effects power there. The RTX 3090 Ti is about 3% faster in the extended overall scores and about 3.4% faster in the standard overall score. The GPU effects there, though, is 26.4% faster. So let's move on to 3D applications. First of all, V-Ray. The 4080 is about 22 to 25% faster in the CUDA and RTX scores. The 3070 Ti here, now we see a big performance increase, is about 35 to 38% slower than the 4070 Ti. And the 3090 Ti is actually 7.3 to 7.6% slower in the CUDA and RTX scores, which just really shows that the new RT cores and the new generation GPU architecture really shines in the 3D performance here for creators. In Blender, the 4080 is about 26 to 33% faster in the monster, junk shop and classroom scenes. The RTX 3070 Ti is 37 to 52% slower, which is a ridiculous performance increase here in Blender. That's where we see the biggest improvement. The 3090 Ti is actually 20% slower in the monster scene, about the same on the junk shop scene, and about 20% slower in the classroom scene, which is ridiculous GPU power there. In Octanebench here, the 4080 is about 30% faster. The 3070 here, this is 3070, not 3070 Ti, because I don't have a benchmark for 3070 Ti here. So I actually ran it with one of the 3070s I have here in the studio. And the RTX 3070 is 42.5% slower in the Octanebench. And the 3090 Ti is about 2% slower in the Octanebench benchmark compared to the 4070 Ti. So overall, we can see that it's impressive performance and yet not so impressive performance depending which creator you are. In terms of photo editing applications, the performance increase really isn't that impressive. In video editing performance, actually, that's where we see very interesting results. A lot of the times the 4070 Ti was faster than the 4080, but here is one thing that kinda you have to think about again. We only have a 12 gigabytes of VRAM. Now, I know that it's more than previously, and you know, it's quite a lot for a lot of people, but if you're doing multicam edits and perhaps more than 4K edit, I am personally working constantly with 4K, and 6K files, multicam editing plus things on the top B-roll there, and I can see up to 16 gigabytes of VRAM in use. So just if you are in the similar kind of situation, you might want to pump up to the 4080 that has 16 gigabytes of VRAM, or even 3090 Ti, which has 24 gigabytes of VRAM, just because that VRAM will be the bottleneck of the GPU, and the GPU can't stretch its legs just because you're running out of video memory. But in terms of the actual playback, GPU effect score, and just general GPU performance apart from the VRAM of 12 gigabytes, that's very impressive. We're often performing better than the 4080 and the 3090 Ti, which is just very, very impressive considering the price of this. If you can get it for around $800 or something like that, just look at the price of the 3090 Ti and the 4070 Ti, because you might actually get a very good deal, and it might be worth going with actually the 4070 Ti. I also want to mention that the DaVinci Resolve benchmarks, I was using the DaVinci Resolve 17.4.5, not the DaVinci Resolve 18, just because a lot of the 30 series cards that I don't have anymore were loaner cards, and they were benchmarked with the DaVinci Resolve 17. So I had to kind of downgrade the DaVinci Resolve and do the 40 series benchmarks in there, which means that if you get a DaVinci Resolve and you're actually a DaVinci Resolve user, you actually get much higher scores, and especially the fusion score will be much faster with the new DaVinci Resolve 18, and some of the AI tools and things that DaVinci Resolve uses are much better in the 40 series as well, just so you know. In terms of 3D here now, the actual rasterizing and calculating performance of the GPU is absolutely insane, and we can see that in Blender and even V-Ray and Octanebench. The 4070 Ti is just absolutely amazing. Not just the performance, but also performance per watt, competing with 3090 Ti, which is a 450 watt card compared to 285 watts. That is impressive, and actually runs cooler and performs much better. It's just insane, right? But if you're a 3D creator, then you probably know that VRAM is very, very important, and depending on which scenes you're working with, 12 gigabytes might not be enough for you. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but that might be one of the reasons to go with a 3090 Ti instead, because you just got much bigger, you know, video memory buffer there. If you're a 3D creator, let me know in the description below, which one would you prefer? More VRAM or more GPU calculating performance? Comment down below. So then, in conclusion, do I recommend the RTX 4070 Ti or not? And I have kind of mixed feelings here. This is not up to 3 times as fast as the 3090 Ti. Definitely not. This is just Nvidia's one of the marketing kind of just tricks to play with, because in gaming, in certain scenarios, you might be able to get 3 times the performance compared to that because of the DLSS and so on. But for a creator, I am not seeing anything like that, not even close. We can see like up to 50% improvement in compared to some of these things. But the biggest difference I saw here was in Blender, which was about 20% faster compared to the 3090 Ti. So that kind of can put some people off. But then at the same time, if you look at the market out there and what can you buy right now? If you're looking at a card for around $800, then you've got about 3080 there. Maybe you can get a 3080 12 gigabyte there, but still they would be kind of worse than this 4070 Ti. So it's a newer, It's roughly about the same price, and you can get extra 2 GB of VRAM compared to the 10 GB 3080, for example. And you get much better media engines and AV1 encoding. Talking about the media engines, all the media engines are the same on all of the 40 series cards, like I mentioned before. And we have AV1 support on this one, as well as all the other 40 series GPUs. So if you want to stream, for example, to Twitch or YouTube with AV1, which is much better quality per bitrate, then the 40 series is a fantastic thing for you. And even in video editing, the export scores and even the timeline performance, if you're running, for example, an AMD CPU, are much better on this 40 series card. Now, if you're running an Intel K series CPU like the 12th or 13th gen, then the media engines are still better on the iGPU than on the 40 series here. Unless you're doing AV1 exporting or encoding, then the 40 series there. But kind of the best combination would be to have Intel QuickSync as well as the 40 series card. That would be the best. But if you somehow want to just go with AMD 7000 series CPUs, then having this one will be much better card for you than an AMD card. Even the 7900 XTX is not as good as this one for creators, just because 3D applications don't quite work as well with the AMD. Not yet, but please AMD, let's make them work, because then we have more competition, meaning Nvidia's prices will go down and, you know, better for us. If you want to pick this 4070 up, I'll leave it in the description below, and please do let me know in the comments below, what do you think about the 4070 Ti? Do you think this is a good price now? I do think this seems like a bit of a better deal than the 4080, you know, price to performance kind of, but I'd love to know what you think. Let me know in the comment section below. And if you do want to build yourself best bang for buck PC, then check out the PC build guides in the description below. There's a PC for you, whatever budget you have, you can configure it there. I'll explain everything in there, how to build it, which parts to get, which parts to upgrade, downgrade, what to not get. Check them out in the description below. Bye bye.